he does something every day, and he did it again tonight. If you look up at the backboard, about 11 and a half feet up there, you see 3 fingerprints. That was his left hand as he put his right hand on the top as if he was taking a quarter off that backboard, then looked over to the Sixers bench and said, watch out.
Yo, what's going on? Hope y'all having a great week. It's Thursday and it is the start of TIFF. And we got to talk about a lot of stuff. We got to talk about this Vince Carter stuff. And look, it hasn't been leaked officially, but I heard about it for the first time 2 months ago. I sat on it and I heard about it from somebody that I really trust about 2 weeks ago. And I was like, I don't want to be wrong about this. So let me just wait. And then yesterday I heard about it from a third person, and this one looked even more like visually accurate. So I'm gonna put it this way. At this point, if the Raptors are not retiring Vince's jersey, they have done a hell of a job. A hell of a job, you know, uh, let's say misleading people on this. So I wouldn't understand why they would have done that. So yes, it makes sense. It's the 30th year, right? It's the 30th anniversary. The team is edging into a rebuild. You need moments like this. You need moments like this. You need nights like this, right? Everyone's going to show up for Vince's jersey retirement. Boom. That's one sellout. That's one high level marketing, if you want to call it like a high ticket value. So yeah, you're gonna need that, and especially you're gonna need that towards the second half of the season. So I'm not sure when they're gonna announce this, but there's still some people in this city that believe that Vince Carter should not have his jersey retired, that Kyle Lowry should be the first guy to have his jersey retired. And I don't speak for Kyle Lowry, of course, but I've always felt that Vince would and should have his jersey retired first. And I honestly think Kyle would agree. So let's talk a little bit about why I believe Vince Carter deserves to have his jersey retired. First of all, it does matter what you did when you did it, right? Sometimes people have to crawl so other people can walk, so other people can run. I do think that it was a highly controversial decision to stay in Toronto when Vince did. He was the most marketable athlete in the world, and he chose Canada. He chose Toronto. He chose to stay. He chose to build here. And were it not for grossly incompetent, management, I'm not really sure where the Raptors would be, with Vince. And, again, we can talk a lot about his own stagnation. Did he peak in 2001? Did he work hard enough? And probably to his own words, he didn't work hard enough. But just because he didn't turn into Michael Jordan doesn't mean he wasn't a hell of a player. He was absolutely on par with other stars of the time, like Ray Allen, etc. Maybe he never quite eclipsed the heights of Kobe Bryant and Tracy McGrady, but he was really in that conversation. He was right there. And there's nothing to suggest that he was a bad guy or that he wasn't a guy that you couldn't build a championship core around. And maybe he wasn't going to be the emotional rah leader of that championship team. But hey, there's plenty of guys in NBA history that have won championships that are celebrated as great players that maybe didn't have that alpha dog personality. And I just think that he was a hell of a talent. He certainly popularized the shit out of the Raptors brand. If you're a 90s kid and, early 2000s kid, and you just go back to watching the rap videos of that era, how many number 15 jerseys do you see? Right. And how many Raptor jerseys have you seen since? He was the guy. And prior to Kawhi Leonard, he was the only guy in this franchise's entire history. Up until Kawhi Leonard, he was the only guy that could have ever been in that conversation as a top 5 player in the league. And I understand that maybe in 2001, had Tracy McGrady stayed, had Vince, continued on the progression, had the Raptors, blah, blah, blah. I think by 2002, the Raptors will be a perennial finals contender for the next 3-4 years. Tracy left, Vince got injured, Raptors management fell apart. Rob Babcock came in, drafted Rafael Arujo, Richard Petty, teachers pension fund, cheap ownership, incompetent management, bad draft picks, bad decisions, overpaying free agents. If you lived through it, you absolutely understand. I don't think all of this was Vince's fault. Of course, me personally, having watched it as a Raptor fan, one of the biggest scapegoats, or not scapegoats, culprits of that era were the people who were reporting on it. People like Dave Feshik, right? People like Doug Smith. And I had really no idea who the Toronto media were when I was in when I was in New York, when I was in New Jersey, when I was in, the States. I had no concept of who these people were. But the first impression lasts, and the first impression I got of Toronto media in general and Canadian media in general when it comes to American athletes, basketball, and all the sentiments that come with it was actually with this Vince situation. His injuries, the parking spot, the draft stuff, the trade demand, and inevitably the 10-year shitstorm of just misinformation and spreading shit. And I'd be honest, when Vince was traded, I was upset too, right? I think a lot of you would agree that it took some time for that to heal. It did not take me 15 years to heal that wound, though, because it was literally the year after Vince got traded that I got a chance to meet Vince Carter. And that was when it really shifted for me because, again, when you get his side of the story in terms of what happened, and then you start to hear more stuff, that was when it really, really clicked for me. And all that anger and all that, frustration that I had towards why did he not want to stay? Why did he hate Canada? Why did he hate Toronto? Why did he, why was he, quitting on his team? Why was he giving out plays? All that stuff. It just went away. It went away so quickly. And then you get the notion that this was a guy who wanted to stay. This is a guy who really wanted to stay. This is a guy who wanted to build something here. This is a guy who wanted to recruit players to come here. This is a guy who, despite everything that happened in the aftermath of him leaving, all the bitterness that could have been, all the, the bait, because let me tell you something. There's nothing American media wants more from a ex-Raptor than for them to shit on Canada. Nothing, nothing. That they lead those questions. They love those questions. They want Antonio Davis to criticize the metric system. They want that. They'll spoon feed him that and they'll print it. They want Chris Bosh to say the air is different. They want Chris Broussard to say that the culture is different and that black people don't feel comfortable in Canada. They want that because that's good. It's good for ratings. It's good for their publication. It's a good quote, right? So Vince Carter saying, "Oh, Canada's small time. I needed to expand my wings to the tri-state area or something like that." That would have gone really far, but he never did that. He never did that once. He never talked badly about Toronto, ever. In fact, he went further. He actually talked well about Toronto on his way out. He talked well about Toronto in the subsequent interviews that he did. He talked well about Toronto even 10 years later. He talked well about Toronto around the league. He continued to be an ambassador. And I think that that goes a really long way towards healing whatever misunderstandings. Because, again, when you understand the conflict, which was really Vince versus the management, Vince versus the media, right? When you understand that conflict, I think you have to ask yourself in the 20 years since he left, do you have a different appreciation or a different understanding of where those two sides initially stood? Yes, 20 years removed, I mean, even 5 years removed, we could say management was trash. And if he was butting heads with them, ask yourself if you were the most in demand, marketable Nike athlete in the world, wouldn't you be pushing your weight a little bit if you knew management was so terrible? And then there's the media. And this channel is no secret to trashing Raptors media. And a lot of those faces and a lot of those powers that be are still in power today. A lot of those old farts that were old farts back then are just older farts today. So really, that's really what it comes down to, right? It's envy, it's not understanding, it's hockey culture. It's a lot of, Sidney Crosby and Ty Domi wouldn't do this. Who the hell is this guy? And this guy's getting paid more than those guys, and he's getting all the attention. And there's envy. There's actual envy, right? There's jealousy, there's spite, and then there is this power trippiness, right? Where a whole bunch of people who weren't very successful in sports see a dude who's very successful And quite frankly, too honest. Vince was too honest for his own good, way too honest for his own good, and a little naive, right? And I think, he has come a very long way. The VC show, all the stuff he's doing with the media now, I think he reflects on that as well. That he didn't understand things back then, but now he understands them now. And he was 24, 25 years old. He's not supposed to understand the whole world at that point, and that's why you have parents. So, you know, again, do I have a completely different understanding of Sam Mitchell? I didn't like Sam Mitchell back then, but if Sam Mitchell was my coach, I might have some issues with it as well. If Rafer Alston was my starting point guard, I might have some issues with that as well, especially when I'd asked management not to bring him back. And there's a lot that went on behind the scenes. But what is most pressing here is that before he was traded, he asked not to be traded. And that story just does not get enough press. It does not come out enough. That he asked simply that he was being not used properly. He was being benched in fourth quarters. His minutes were down. Everyone will point to the reduced numbers, and then they'll, and I think what hurt Raptor fans the most is just how great he was in New Jersey the year of, like after they got traded. And I think what hurts Raptor fans even more than that was the ridiculous return that you got for him. If you'd gotten Latrell Sprewell and Allen Houston or something like that, you might have felt a little bit better about it. Maybe, at least you would have gotten something serviceable. But Aaron Williams, Eric Williams, Alonzo Mourning not wanting to come here after, the biggest star in your franchise's history just left. You're saddled with all these contracts that you basically signed to appease the guy that left. You're told he quit on you and that he hates you. Yeah, I understand the booze. I understand the booze, but I also understand that where there is so much hate, there is also so much love. And again, no better time than the present to retire this man's jersey. It is long overdue, frankly. And the Brooklyn Nets / New Jersey Nets, who are about to go through a very terrible season themselves, have already announced that they're going to be retiring Vince Carter's jersey. There's no way Vince Carter is having his jersey retired by the Nets and not by the Toronto Raptors. Okay. He will always be remembered more as a Raptor than anything else. That will always be, you think Vince Carter, you think Raptors. You think Kawhi Leonard? Sorry. You think Spurs. Okay. And you're always going to think Spurs. With Kawhi, you're going to think Spurs. You're going to think possibly you're going to think Clippers and what could have been, but you're not going to necessarily think Raptors. There are certain players, they have their entire legacy etched with a particular franchise. Sometimes it's easy. Right? Sometimes it's really easy to have that player associated with that franchise because they never leave that franchise. Like with Kobe Bryant, he never left the Lakers, so you don't have to associate him with any. But what about a player like Kevin Durant, where he's basically all over the place, or LeBron James? Well, LeBron James, in my opinion, will always be a Cavalier. That is the association that I have with LeBron. KD will always be a Thunder. It's not just always where you were drafted, but in some cases, it's really where you made your biggest mark on the NBA franchise, on the league as a whole, on the basketball world. And yeah, for Vince, it's always going to be as a Raptor. So it's going to be a very touching moment. It's going to be one very long overdue. And it's going to be one that I've been writing about in any platform that I can for the last 10 years. Toronto needs to forgive and move on. They need to celebrate one of the greatest athletes in Canadian history. They need to talk about how much this guy meant, not only to, Toronto. And no, I do not buy this whole like, oh my God, if the Raptors didn't have Vince, they would have folded like the Vancouver Grizzlies. No, there was way too much interest in Toronto. Don't buy that bullshit narrative. But there's no chance in hell that you would have had the level of interest and the level of growth. And when you talk to kids who are on the Canadian national team today, who did they grow up watching? Vince Carter. Who made basketball cool in their household? Vince Carter. And I think that it's just very, very underrated what this guy did for this sport and, his philanthropy work off the court, building courts, his public engagements. If you ever met Vince, whether you were a fan or a colleague or a scout or whatever, always the biggest smile, always just very present, very nice guy. And I just think that he was a perfect guy to lead this franchise at the time. I will never ever forget those charity all-star games. They were super fun. The dance-offs, the basketball camp that I attended for as a kid with him. I have so many memories of being a Raptor fan, and I got to tell you, the best memories of being a Raptor fan were dreaming of what was possible with Vince. And that's second, by the way. It's not second. So it is the best memory. In terms of what was the dreams of possibility, I'll agree that the We the North, Kyle Lowry led Raptors went further. I agree. They won a championship. I agree. But the dream of what could have been with this dude, right, potentially becoming the face of the league while wearing a Raptor jersey, teaming up with his cousin, 2000, 2001, if you were there, the momentum was insane. And that momentum has never been captured again until now, hopefully, until now. And what we're doing with, James saying prime Vince was scary. I agree. Joan Davis saying Katie loved Vince. He was a Raptors fan growing up. Yes, that is true as well. The homie the homie Nicked. VC is an important part of Raptors history, but his exit is part of his story. He did want to get traded, and he admitted to not trying towards the end. It's fair to blame management for that, but let's not do revisionism. Okay, so I'm glad you brought this up. So the not trying, right? And also wanting to get traded. Okay. So first of all, thank you for the super chat. It is important to remember that David Thompson interview where he said he didn't try as hard as he could have. When I said he is too honest for his own good, that is exactly what I mean. He was trying to take accountability and it came off the wrong way. Okay. Did he, coast on his laurels one off season? Sure. Did Shaquille O'Neal do the same thing every off season for 10 years? Yes. There's a lot of players where if you ask them, gun to your head, did you leave something on the table? Could you have been in better shape? Could you have worked harder? Could you have developed your free throws a little bit better? I think they would all say the same thing. And so he was trying to motivate himself to work even harder in New Jersey and prove all the naysayers wrong. But acting like he didn't try, I think there is an element of human emotion, you know, sentiment, emotion, psychology, where when you are in a situation where you have a lack of trust, there's promises that have been made and broken. I don't think it's always entirely on you when you lack motivation. For instance, again, we are not pro athletes. It's hard for me to give the example of, a coach and a player. But imagine, for instance, that you have a boss, right? And your boss says to you, if you hit this quota, you're going to get a bonus, right? And you work your ass off to hit that quota. And then at the end of the year, they say, oh, by the way, I know we said that you were going to get a bonus, but actually you're not going to get a bonus. You're actually getting a deduction. Sorry for the miscommunication. We were just trying to motivate you. And then you kind of go into that and you come out of that saying, what the hell just happened? I can't trust these people. I'm working for them. I'm supposed to be putting in sweat equity and they're putting me down. I want you to imagine, I want you to imagine that, you go to work and you have an on-job injury and the next thing you know, you see that your boss is basically calling you out for faking injuries. But your injury is real. You know it's real. Your boss is spreading misinformation across the company saying you're trying to milk, severance or not severance, you're trying to milk pay while nursing a fake injury. And now you're like, you're feeling some way about it. It goes two ways. It goes two ways. So did he work as hard as he could have? I don't think he had ever I don't think he was going to lie and say he didn't. But should he have been maligned the way that he was for attending his graduation when he was pretty much the reason that the Raptors had even gotten out of the first round and had a chance to win in a game 7? It's not like he played terribly. It's not like he played terribly. The level of scrutiny that came with it was directly proportionate to the level of hype that emerged. And the league basically used Vince Carter to bridge an awkward gap between Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, or Michael Jordan and LeBron James. And Vince was it. Vince was that. Penny was injured. Grant Hill was kind of getting injured a little bit. So, Vince was just the next up, right? It's what people could sell. And maybe they prematurely believed that he was going to be this Michael Jordan like killer. And then they saw a guy who just smiled at his opponent and they said he was soft. Vince Carter was not soft. Vince Carter was not soft. I remember 2004, Kevin O'Neal, I remember it was a question to Kevin O'Neal specifically saying, "Who's your best defender?" And he said, "I know who I want my best defender to be and who has a chance to be my best defender is Vince Carter." And, again, did he ever apply himself enough on that end of the basketball court? Probably not. No. But I resent this concept of, that he just wanted to leave at all costs and, the reasoning for leaving. Yeah, after a certain period of time, he was like, "Okay, if you're not going to do this, then trade me." And maybe it was leverage. Maybe it was leverage because he had asked the Raptors to draft Andre Iguodala, and then they went with Rafael Arujo, which I think in hindsight you can agree was a really bad decision on the Raptors' part. He had asked to be consulted on the Rob Babcock hire, and they went and hired Rob Babcock without consulting him, and that was also a really, really bad decision. And there were a ton of really bad decisions. So, would Julius Irving have been a good decision? I have no idea, but certainly hard to imagine he could have had less basketball sense than Rob Babcock. So, again, it's neither here nor there. What I'm trying to say is that I think we all need to move on and we need to realize that there's a lot that was said behind the scenes, and it doesn't really matter what was said and what was done. What does matter is that Vince Carter in the 15, 16 some odd years, after being traded, sorry, so nearly 20 years since being traded, right? Or 2005. Yeah. So nearly 20 years since being traded, I think he has proven over and over who he is as a person. So I think we need to, have that and we need to move on from it. Okay, so happy he's getting that. Rebranding for year 10. You know who's ready for a rebrand? That guy, Scotty Barnes, who was spotted wearing the Raptors purple jersey before he even becoming a Raptor. I thought this was like purely prophetic. Now, obviously, basketball players wear jerseys all the time, but I just thought it was kind of interesting that the Raptors are going for a rebrand, and that's Scotty Barnes in 2000 and I want to say 2019 or 2020 on Florida State campus riding a scooter in a Tracy McGrady jersey. The Dino jersey is coming back. And yes, I have seen some diagrams. Am I allowed to say it? I don't want to say anything that's going to get me sued. I have seen some stuff. Stuff is vague. Okay, I've seen some stuff that suggests that the Raptors are certainly going to be going in a more purple and familiar direction. And personally, I'm for it. I'm for it. I remember playing NBA 2K and I would often go for the purple jerseys and it's just different. It's just different. I don't know. Like, I mean, the red jerseys, there's a lot of teams that have red. The Bulls have red. Like, to me, there's something very iconic about these jerseys. And it's associated with hope, youth, transition. A lot of the associations that I have, high flying, long athletic wings, a lot of the association, of course, a lot of losing, unfortunately, too. But these jerseys have a positive association with me to something new, you know? And personally, I think they're very cool, and I think they've aged very well, and a lot of people really like them. So, will there be a slight modification on these jerseys? Yes, of course. But the general color theme of purple is coming back, which is very cool. Now, let's talk about Christian Koloko. Now, I realize a lot of people have very split ideas on Koloko. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for y'all so you can see it. Hang on, pull myself off. Yes, that is basketball reference. And that is Christian Koloko with a $2 million salary. That's a minimum contract. Now, some people have speculated that this is a mistake. Basketball Reference very seldom makes mistakes like this. Okay. Number two, he wasn't on this list before. So someone went in and added him. This is not a oops, we forgot to remove it. I think I checked 7 months ago. He wasn't on this. This is also not it's old news. They haven't refreshed their thing from last year because you can see Jonte Porter's not on this list. You can even see Sasha Vezenkov from a couple of months ago is not on this list. So somebody went in, removed Sasha Vezenkov, removed Jonte Porter, removed all those cap holds, and added Christian Koloko. These things don't usually just happen this way, and it is a big deal. And I'm saying this because, again, it's not a typo. Do you know what I mean? You can't make a typo like this. This is not a oops, we forgot to remove it, or oops, it's an old web page. It's not. This is basketball, and it's also not a random site. And it's also not a site that usually makes a lot of mistakes. So I think that that's something. But one thing that I encountered in the Christian Koloko stuff was that there's some people that actually are curious, why does Christian Koloko even matter? What is he? What does he do? He's not that good. He's a second round pick. Come on, Rob. Why are we glazing Christian Koloko? Well, let me put it this way. Go back about 2 years and watch some of the videos that I made on Christian Koloko, and you'll understand why I like him. That's really just scratching, that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of why I like the guy. I think some people also, there's just like a lot of like very loud Koloko detractors, and I don't really understand it, but I'll try to summarize their points. Number one, they don't really like his box score output and don't really see the big deal because he's a second round pick, and he was already a little bit of an older rookie. And okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is they think after a year off of playing basketball that he's probably going to take a year to recover, and it's not really worth it. And maybe Bruno Fernando is the right way to go. And there was also a clip of him playing basketball. There was like a pickup game where he's playing basketball with other NBA players, and some people were pointing out that he didn't look that good. Okay, can I please remind y'all that last year we had people panicking that Scotty Barnes was a worse player than Marvin Bagley because of a pickup game, or that he couldn't score on Andre Drummond, so he was trash, and oh my God. And then Scotty came out looking like, great. I like Christian Koloko because of his short roll passing. I like him because of his hip flexibility and how fluid he is as a mover. I like him because he's a transition target. I like him because he's a lob target. I like him because he's a really great motor. I also like him because he's a great like thinker of the game. Like he really sees the game and he really understands the game and he works really hard at it. I like him because he has an evolving shot that has been proven through an increase, a better free throw shooting percentage pretty much every single year at Arizona. And his development might just be one of those rare development stories because of how late he picked up basketball, that there's a little bit more untapped potential in him than your average 24-year-old player. Okay. So all of that combined does not even scratch the tip of the iceberg. The other thing, he was effectively, in my opinion, one of the top 20 defenders as a rookie. I understand his offense was abysmal. He wasn't efficient around the rim. He couldn't finish anything. He had no post game to speak of. His jump shot was shaky and inconsistent. I get all of that. But honestly, with the way the Raptors like to play, having a defensive eraser like this on the back line of your defense is insane. And he is so good at it. He tracks the ball so well. And I just think that he has just this outside shot to be, an all defense type of guy. And that's not something to sneeze at. It's free. You know what I mean? It's free. You're not giving up 2 first-round picks to get this guy. It's free. He's yours, right? And he wants to be here. He's spent quite a bit of time, posting about Urish. He always checks out our stories, which is really cool. And, you know, I think he's fantastic. If you want some bonus on the offense side, he was also in the 1 year he played, in the limited minutes he played, he was also Scotty's most frequent pick and roll partner. He was the most effective screener for Scotty, effectively, and most frequent screener for Scotty. They have a great relationship. So add in all of this, and what do you get? So you have a guy who's 24 years old, who hasn't played a ton of basketball, so he has some untapped potential. He has a great penchant to grow and understands the game, right? To understand the game, there's great measurements. The tools are there, the physical tools are there. The jump shot is evolving. The defense is fluid. He has already a track record on the NBA level as a rookie of all things. And so, yeah, I'm not going to erase everything I think about this guy from watching Arizona film and NBA film because he struggled in one pickup game. Okay. I will say this. I think, he had done a ton of work before he got shut down last year on the jump shot. So I think that Bueno Kitty saying you have to be a loyal player in CK2. You have a loyal player in CK2. Yes. You know, I think he has just this incredible mind for the game, especially defensively. The way he communicates on the back line. I watched a lot of him, very intently. Like he was just one of those rookies that I had a lot of vested interest in. I took a lot of interest in him. And of course, I will take a similar interest this year in someone like Yours Shamshay. And again, you watch these guys, they're really raw, right? But they have great instincts and they have great measurements. And those are the things that are hard to teach, if not impossible to teach. You're not going to increase, you know, Marvin Bagley's body to be longer like Yours Shamshay or Christian Koloko. You're not going to make a slow footed big fast like this, right? So yeah, pure part of it is hypothetical. Can you jog up the brain to be a little bit more coordinated? Can you jog up the basketball IQ? But hey, we never got to see Christian Koloko with a development coach like Jama. So that is another thing that I'm really excited about is like you have finally have this development staff and this guy didn't get to play, a game under them. So putting them in better positions, I also just think he fits. He fits beautifully with the current core, right? He fits beautifully with, Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett and Scotty Barnes. I just think that it all works together, right? So I'm very excited to have him back if he comes back. But if basketball reference is right, if my friend is right, if the rumors are right, then we will get Christian Koloko back, and you will see one very, very happy Raptor fan. Okay, the final topic for today is youth and neuroplasticity and why young teams are so unpredictable and so interesting. Okay, so we talked a little bit about neuroplasticity and neuroscience in general when we did that interview with Catherine. We're going to do more of that next week when we come out with another interview on neurotech, which is specifically, how to get better sleep and how sleep improves memory and how memory improves basketball function. Give me a W. Daniel Franklin saying, "Are you off Jonathan Mobo?" No, Mobo is awesome. Jonathan Mobo is awesome, but he's also 23 years old. And I do have to say that even though I think that he's a very young 23, the potential that Ulrich has is likely much greater. That's not to say that Ulrich will be a better player than Jonathan Mobo. Right now, you would probably bet your ass that Mobo is going to be the better player for the next little while. But if both guys hit their absolute peak outcome, Ulrich's outcome is just a little bit better. Nutica saying, who has a higher potential, Shamshay or Koloko? Shamshay. Shamshay has like the highest potential on this team other than Scotty Barnes, in my opinion. It's just again, it's raw potential. A lot has to go right, but you have to understand what being 18 and being this good, having picked up basketball this late means. You also have to consider motor. You have to consider coordination. You have to consider his current jump shot, right? Like Ulrich can shoot. Like this is not something you could have said about Christian Koloko at the same age at 18 was a little bit taller and a little bit longer than Ulrich, but he was nowhere near the passer, nowhere near the shooter. And these things matter. So the offensive upside for Ulrich is insane. He has already like a little bit more of a fluid handle. He can already dribble up the court, bro. Like Derp Jones saying Shamshay or Misi. Shamshay. So this is the crazy thing. I was that high on Misi in the draft, and I didn't see this in Ulrich. I really didn't. The gap between Ulrich and Eve as is basically passing. Like one of the things that was always the caveat was like I love everything about Eve Misi, but I hate the way he sees the game. And that's just, that was me very high on his motor, on his athletic potential, on his rim running potential. But the way you see the game actually ties in very well to the eye and think about Steph Curry, right? So there's a video by Michael McElvey, and I'll give Michael credit for this one because it was a fantastic video. And it talked about how great athletes see. Okay. Now I'm talking 2020 vision, 2012 vision. I'm not talking about that. I want you to imagine, sight. Okay. And I want you to imagine sight as more than just simply clarity, but rather focus. If you're a filmmaker or cinematographer, you understand that there's depth of field, focus, etc. And so when you rack focus on a camera, you can either bring objects into focus and out of focus. And all of that is simply saying your focal length, right? So right now, right, your focal distance is your screen, you're honing in on your screen. And so everything on the outside is kind of blurry. That's how our eyes see. So what they did was they did a bunch of tests across many sports: golf, football, hockey, tennis, basketball. And what they found was the highest performers in every sport see better. Baseball. What what it means was that there is I think it was called quiet vision. I think it was called quiet vision. Basically, before Steph Curry shoots, he has a greater focus and a greater sight to the rim than the average player. He looks at the rim, or I think it was like he looks at the rim longer. And if you've ever played basketball with a kid who is a little bit out of his depth, or maybe a kid who's new to basketball, you'll see his eyes darting a lot. Have you noticed that? If you played any sports, let me know. If you see a player who is new to basketball, you're going to see their eyes dancing up and down, and they're going to do a lot of that. But when you see a pro, their eyes are focused. Everything is focused, right? And it comes down to how you see, the processing of information, the quickness. So, if you've seen Steph Curry doing the light drill, right? What is the light drill? You look in one direction, you look right in the center, and then these lights go off, and you're dribbling the basketball with the left hand. And as the lights go off, there's one here, one here, one here, and one here. And you just got to hit them. And so you're dribbling, and then you got to hit them. And they're measuring the reaction. What they found is that over and over, that the best players see better. So the best goalies are having a better way of tracking the puck. The best putters in golf have a better way of tracking their movement. And because their window of sight is actually greater, they can correct small things. Talks about it a lot about, for instance, yeah, so all of this. So again, there is something to be said about being young and seeing the game a little bit better. I think Jokic just has a great vision for the game. He doesn't he doesn't he doesn't have those darty eyes that make me nervous in young players. Does that make sense? Is it the quiet eye? Anyways, neuro, neuroplasticity in youth. So, what is neuroplasticity? It is the brain's ability to bend and break in different directions to allow new neural pathways and new connections in the brain. We talked about the Halo headphones and neurotech of that sort and how to stimulate the brain during training. But more specifically, there is something very interesting about being young. And I think we talked about it in the last episode where we talked about, when kids are young, they can learn things that when they're older, it becomes a little bit harder, like new languages. Well, in this case, you have a very young team. You have a very young team that is very impressionable. And what you're trying to do is open up new neural pathways. You're trying to make the brain a little bit more bendy and a little bit more a little bit more elastic. And if you've noticed something in Scotty Barnes over the last 1 year, let me know if you've noticed him speaking differently. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed a change in how he is basically talking, like his cadence? Everything about him has sort of changed. And it's also, I'm noticing a change this offseason in how he's moving. Like the movement patterns have been different. Well, that potential that is in Scotty to change is there for just about everyone on this team, right? It won't be to the degree of Scotty because some part of this is gifted and genetics and all that stuff, but the ability to improve is there for everybody, and it is there more so with the younger team. But largely, what I'm trying to say is that I don't think we give the brain enough respect as it comes to how young players improve, right? Now, it's not automatic that an 18-year-old today, 5 years from now, is going to be better. Some 18-year-olds get worse. It's not for sure that the 25-year-old is done growing. Some 25-year-olds grow tremendously between 25 and 32. I think it's important to realize that age is nothing but a number. There's some people who are very old 25. There's also a very young 25, if that makes sense. Our minds do not age exactly, right? So, but it's also not so rigid to say, okay, well, this guy is 24 and he's done growing, right? Or 25 and he's done growing because his brain is, he's hit this threshold. People have different ages. And what I'm trying to say is that at this point, the Raptors' greatest goal will be to find untapped potential within all of these players, right? And this potential could have been untapped for a myriad of reasons. Maybe the players were in the wrong situation. Maybe there were some development issues early on. Maybe there were some learning difficulties. Maybe they had a stressful childhood. Okay. Maybe. Maybe they didn't get enough exposure to the right basketball training at a young age. Maybe in the case of someone like Christian Koloko or Yuri Shamshe, they simply did not play the sport until they were much older. What I'm saying is that it's not so rigid. It's not like, oh, it's gone, you lost it. Actually, you can actually find some of it back. You can get some of this back now, right? And with players like Grady Dick, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, I think they're all in that window where they can take a major jump. All of them. Kelly Olynyk, probably not. Bruce Brown, probably not. Jakob Poeltl, probably not. Okay. Garrett Temple, not a chance in hell. Okay. There are limits to this. But with Scotty, Ochai, to a very lesser degree, Ochai, Ulrich, Koloko, Grady, RJ, IQ, Jacoby Walter, Jonathan Mobo, these guys, any one of them could get 2 times better pretty much over this summer. Any one of them. Scary times if Scotty Barnes gets 2 times better. But they can, because so much of what you see on the basketball court is the brain. So here's a question. You know what could stop proper development of the brain? Stress. Tremendous amounts of stress. Poor diet, certainly. Brain injury, head injuries like concussions, tumors. What else? Fear, like living in a state of fear. Like if you lived in a really bad neighborhood for a very long period of time. Lack of sleep. A lack of sleep can suppress a certain amount of growth. How do I explain this? Because I'm not I'm not a neuroscientist. So how do I explain this the best way? The best way that I can explain it, and I'll let Catherine completely rip this to shreds later on. I'll send this to her and let her know that I said this way. I want you to think of it like development is water in a tube. Okay. And sometimes that tube gets pressed at certain points. You have a huge loss in your life, or you have an injury, as I mentioned, or you're in a coma. I don't know. And it just starts to get pressed. So all that water that's been coming through, right? It's just kind of like stuck, or it's not getting through as much, right? I went through this myself, so I'm speaking a little bit on this from experience, but I hit two major life crises during my key development years, both my parents passing away. The year during most, I think 13 to 14, and then 20 to 21. Those are the 2 years that I really dealt with the amount of grief. Grief impacts your sleep. Grief impacts your heart rate. Grief impacts your cortisol levels. Grief impacts your brain in a very big way. If you did brain scans of me the 3 days after my mom passed away, you would see diminished function across the board. My grades slipped, my functions flipped, how I moved changed. I started to hunch over. Things were very different. But what I noticed was a year or two after, I felt a massive surge. And that was the blockage finally released. Okay. Our brains impact not only how we map the court, our brains also impact how we react to situations. It dictates our fearfulness. So our eyes communicate to our brains whether a particular situation is fearful, right? So we got some people, they go to the line, game on the line, they're perfectly cool as a cucumber. Sometimes a lot of stress, a lot of cortisol, they choke, right? That's the brain. That's ultimately the brain. That's all it is. Motor function, how you move, how effective your left hand and right hand is, how quickly you map the court, how much you're willing to take contact. All of these things come down to the brain. So, whatever blockages there are for Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, Grady Dick, whatever they are, there are some. There must be. Because nobody is hitting 100% of their potential right now. Nobody. With Scotty, it might be just some very, very poor habits that he picked up as a youngster on how he handled the basketball, how he shot the basketball, maybe in the most ineffective form. We needed to retrain that. Okay. But that requires neuroplasticity because the plasticity that we're talking about is the ability to change. So when you have formed a bad habit, how do I now replace your bad habit with a good habit? I have to retrain your brain. And how I retrain your brain is going to depend on how elastic your brain actually is. Makes sense? So it's going to matter that your diet is good. When I'm trying to implement change in your behavior, it's going to matter that you're not stressed. It's going to matter that you're properly nourished, that you have a nutritionist that's taking care of you, that you're properly hydrated, that your life is going well, generally speaking. It's going to matter that everything. Okay, now here's another thing. Have you noticed Scotty Barnes taking interest in different things? That's also important, right? So there's a lot of things that can impact the brain in a positive way. For instance, video games, hand-eye coordination. There's drills, trainings, there's tons of things. But going to plays the way he's been going to like all these, I think he went to, did he go to Macbeth? Did he go to Hamlet? Not Hamlet. What am I talking about? The one that everyone keeps talking about. I'm drawing a blank right now. But memory, speaking ironically of memory is going to impact, like, your memory is going to be impacted by how well you've slept. It's going to impact your brain function, how much you can put to repetition the things that I'm teaching you in a practice. It doesn't mean Jack Hamilton. There we go. That's it. It's Hamilton. Thank you guys so much. I've said Hamlet and I'm like, I'm close, but I'm far. Hamilton, right? My bad. So, reading new books. So, if Darko, who is just very, very well versed in this kind of stuff, right? Because he's been doing a lot of training stuff for like many years, and I'm positive he is very well versed in the ideas that I'm presenting here. Sending sending somebody who's had limited exposure to certain areas, even, for instance, if I was the Raptors trainer right now, my first thing would be get all of these guys to learn an instrument. And it would seem so abstract, but the learning of the instrument would absolutely impact the brain in a positive way that would make it more conducive to teaching them about basketball. So again, we are in a very new wave of brain research, and I think Catherine's going to speak a lot on that next week. But I think that that's what makes this team so fascinating is that you have all of these very young, very impressionable players, right? They have all of these ideas about basketball in their mind and the muscle patterns and recognitions. And you have players who, in my opinion, have a lot of this suppressed potential that you just need to unlock. So you take a guy like Jonathan Mobo, look at his background, look at how he's, been bouncing around between programs, and you ask yourself, in another world, if we got our hands on Jonathan Mobo at 17 or 16, could we have made him a five-star recruit? Yes, surely we could have, right? It's not like he didn't want to be a five-star recruit. It's not like he didn't want to work hard. He just went through the wrong pipeline. You take a guy like Yuri Shamshay. You think if Darko Rajakovic could get his hands on Yuri Shamshay when he was 12 years old or 11 years old and start teaching him basketball, that he wouldn't have made him a five-star recruit and maybe like a top 5 pick by the time he was 18 or 19? For sure he would. So then comes the massive question. Okay, you can't build a time machine. You can't have Jonathan Mobo at 17. You can't have Yuri Shamshay at 11. You can't go back and fix all of this stuff. But can you do some version of that today? Right? Can you do something to take all of that quote unquote untapped potential and then release it now before it's too late? These years are very critical, very critical. I am seeing Scotty Barnes moving differently. I'm seeing him talk differently. And I'm getting the feeling that this is a guy that had some insanely untapped, suppressed potential somewhere in his life. And it doesn't really matter why. It could be a lot of things. You know what can impact someone's potential? A year or two grieving on a divorce. Your parents divorce, that could be it. You could have an injury, which holds you out a year, right? Or holds you down, or maybe something that doesn't recover properly, right? Like for instance, just becomes part of, like how you play basketball. Like maybe your wrist doesn't heal properly, and you just start to dribble to compensate for that wrist injury. And then 2, 3 years later, your wrist has healed, but you're still dribbling to compensate for the injury that doesn't exist anymore. There's a lot of things that can suppress potential. What I'm trying to say is that prior to the age of 25, it is perfectly reasonable and perfectly possible to unleash some of that untapped potential. And I understand that potential has a bad rep sometimes because, we say everybody has potential. Yes, but potential without desire to execute is meaningless. Without guidance, it's meaningless. I think the Raptors not only have a whole bunch of really hungry players, because I think that has been pretty much a prerequisite on their end of if we're gonna draft you, you better want to be great. You got to want to work. Well, they have a whole bunch of workers, which is great. They have a whole bunch of people that I believe have a lot of untapped potential because of various things, because they went through a different pipeline, because they had picked up the game late, etc. So they have the two criteria. And then the third thing that you need, the fourth thing, you need 3 and 4. Number 3, you need someone to properly guide, right? And I think the Raptors have that. And then number 4, you need practice. You need plenty of reps, and you need game time, and you need attention. And the Raptors are not wasting any time this summer being in Spain. Being in Spain is great. I'm glad they're there. It's isolating them from their familiar surroundings. It's probably going to teach them a little bit of a new language, which is great also. It's putting Darko in a very familiar territory for him where he has connections, which is great. And it's putting these guys in a very unfamiliar place, which is also great. You know, I'll tell you something. I'll give you a hack. I'll give you all a hack to untap your own potential. I'm going to give you guys a great hack because I have been obsessed with my mind for forever. I've been so obsessed with understanding memory, why I can't remember things certain times, why I can remember certain things certain times, etc. I'll tell you right now, if you are having trouble remembering things and you are under 40, something's wrong. Usually something is wrong. If you're seeing increased brain fog in that situation, it's probably because you're in a very stressful environment and forgetting is how you're coping with it. That's certainly something I can identify with right now. What I will say is that if you want to change your life, if you brush your teeth with your right hand, try brushing your teeth with your left hand for a day or 2 days and tell me how you feel. If you make coffee with your right hand, try doing everything with your left hand for a day and tell me how you feel. Again, This is important. There are not video games. There are actual like simulations that allow a human being to basically step into the body of a dolphin. And then now you have to do everything like a dolphin. And it's so strange. And it, it's so effective because it disrupts current rigid pathways in your brain on what it means to breathe, etc. Before you make any change, you need to be, in my opinion, Pale Fox saying, I'm missing my left hand. What now? If true, if that's not just a horrible joke, I'm very, very sorry. And, maybe use your left foot. So instead of using your right foot to open the trash can, use your left foot. Just see how unfamiliar and weird that it feels. How about picking up a new sport like swimming? Absolutely. New things. New things help a lot. Break your patterns. Like, you know what I mean? Like do new things. And that's why going to plays like Hamilton or, experiencing a different type of book or watching something different or taking on a new hobby or learning to sew, learning to whatever. These things are new because they challenge your brain and they force your brain to break up existing pathways because your brain is wired for efficiency. Everything is efficient. You brush your teeth with your right hand. You open the trash can with your right foot. Everything is like it's kind of pre-programmed. So you have to disrupt the programming every once in a while. And I will say this, that if you are trying to make any sort of changes or learn anything new and you have not slept properly and you are not hydrated and you are not taking care of your body and you are not, you have an excess of visceral fat and you are very stressed out, so your cortisol levels are super high, none of this is going to work. And so I have to ask, do y'all remember Scotty Barnes 2 years ago? Looked stressed, right? He looked really stressed out. And we saw an immediate downturn in his production. We saw injuries. We saw just stagnation. We saw attitude. We saw him kind of snapping at people. And I'm like, okay, so there is at least one place where you saw a lot of untapped potential. Another thing, and this will be the closing thought. I saw a post today about Vladimir Guerrero and how he's been great since the All-Star game, but because because the Blue Jays are trash, the numbers don't matter. And so someone said, "But what were his numbers like when the season actually counted, when it mattered?" So I thought to myself, why don't we use the same argument for Scotty Barnes? What were Scotty Barnes' numbers when the season last year was still in grasp? When he thought there was still a chance to make the playoffs? What were his numbers? 6.0 box plus minus. Do you know the fall off between where he started and where he ended was basically 4 box plus minus? Like to end the year, the last 25, 30 games, which were like basically new teammates, clearly not going to the playoffs, etc. He was around a 2 box plus minus. But to start, he was like 6.7, 8. So there's a chance that all of the improvement we're seeing this year, this offseason, that's an improvement over who he was. He's been improving for 5 straight months, guys. Since he got injured, he could have finished the year happily. He was perfectly good to go like 2 weeks in. If the Raptors were competitive, he could have gone 2 weeks to go. Sorry, what am I trying to say here? 2 weeks before the season ended, he was ready to play. They chose to hold him out because what was the point of playing, draft pick, etc. From that point to this point, he hasn't stopped. He's been working. He's been improving his jump shot, improving the pull-up game, improving everything, improving his movement patterns, getting in even better shape. He's getting a lot more fluid and a little bit more, shifty with his movements. So you think to yourself, if a year ago today he was already a 6.5 to 7 box plus minus type of guy, what is he right now? What is an improvement on that? Could he be a 10 box plus minus guy, a 9 box plus minus guy? That is perfectly in the realm of possibilities. And that would be a top 5 player in the NBA. 9 box plus minus would be Luka Doncic last year. Luka was a 9 box plus minus guy. So I'm just saying it's not that far off. He's really not that far off. And I think the Raptors, between hopefully the Christian Koloko signing, thank you, Basketball Reference, absolutely the Vince Carter retirement, jersey retirement, which is, beautiful, and the potentially explosive quantum leaps that some of these young players are going to take this year. I think this is going to be a really exciting season. I hope you guys enjoy it. Okay, some super chats here. Joan Davis, I know you have a set of topics you want to cover. Don't want to take you too far off course. However, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Michael McElvee's video, The Quiet Eye. Fascinating stuff. Okay, that's so interesting. I don't know if you super chatted this before I actually brought it up, but that's so amazing. The coincidence is incredible. I loved the video. It's one of my favorite videos. I immediately sent it to Brian. I think it's such a great exploration in terms of Joan Davis saying, "Yeah, that was before." Okay, so specifically, I think that I think it was a great video. Obviously, I think it's a fantastic, exploration across topics. I think Michael is probably one of my three favorite, basketball YouTubers on the planet. He has incredibly deep dive, but he's also a former player. I think he played in college. And, I think all of that depth and the quality of his research and it reminds me, yeah, it reminds me a yeah, he's fantastic. In long and short of it, I completely agree with it, right? And I noticed it. I noticed it when I watch young players, right? The ones who have, things going on at home, the ones who have sort of preconditioned themselves to fear and anxiety. You see their eyes, right? They're constantly darting. They're darting from the audience to the crowd, to the ball, to the opponent, to the ball, to the rim. Like they're all over the place. They're not focused, and that's it's the connotation is not like I'm not trying to insult them. Oh, you're not focused, but their eyes can't focus. They can't focus in one place. But when you see a player who's practiced and who's calm, you see that their eyes are very intentional. And I think that, this quiet eye thing is fantastic. Especially the part about, you know, like when you're shooting a free throw. You know what I mean? Like there's like small subtle things that are gonna kind of force you to miss, and the better you see it, the more you are able to course correct before the release. I think that's fantastic stuff, man. And yeah, I encourage anyone to watch it. Like it's a fantastic video. So those are my brief thoughts. Dylan Shoot with the super chat. Really appreciate it. Hey Rob, why do you think Jokic has been number one in the league in defensive box plus minus 3 years in a row? The data seems a bit skewed. Is it largely due to his teammates being so bad when Jokic isn't on the floor? Good question. So specifically, I think defensive analytics are heavily, heavily, heavily behind offensive analytics, right? It's just really hard to measure defense in general. What I will say is that Jokic's defensive box plus minus cannot be completely untethered from his offensive box plus minus, which is generational. And great offense has a wonderful impact on your defense, right? When you think about it, if I can guarantee you that you will score every single time or that you will score at a higher rate, and again, baseball, hockey, these sports would teach us that fractions of a percentage more efficiency can make a monumental difference in terms of your analytics. So imagine that the Nuggets offense is 25 to 30% better with Jokic on the court. Okay. Well, if offense being better with him on the court will lead to more set designed, like it will lead to more set plays, set defenses, right? Defensive possessions. You're going to have less transition leakouts. You're going to have a lot less scrambling. You're going to have a lot less cross matching, and that's going to matter. The other thing I would say is that they've obviously designed around his weaknesses and strengths as a defender. The third thing I would say is he's actually not that bad a defender. And I think he catches a lot of flack. So does Luca. Both these guys are really smart players. I think too many people hone in on one-on-one defense. Like, They see a guy like Davion Mitchell picking up full court. They see Patrick Beverly being really pesky, and they're like, "Oh, that's a great defender." Or they see a guy like Gary Trent Jr. getting a whole bunch of steals, jumping the passing lane, or Allen Iverson. They're like, "That's a great defender." I've lived in a world in which people can try to convince me that Allen Iverson is a great defender, and I know he's not. And then I also remember 2, 3 years ago, I was getting really angry listening to a whole bunch of people saying Gary Trent Jr. was a great defender, and he is not. Defense is not about just getting steals. Defense is also not about getting blocks. Defense is a massive, massive calculation. It's about how you box out. It's about how you switch. It's about how you communicate defensively. It's also about how you read the court, like how you read coverages, how you're able to, anticipate things. It also matters that you don't foul. It matters that you rebound. There's so many things. Jokic is a great rebounder, fantastic rebounder. That helps his defense. He's very smart. That also helps his defense. He's not a shot blocker. He's not a rim protector. But does he deter at the rim? Sure. He's huge. He's a huge human being. He's 6'11", 270-ish, right? He's a physical presence, right? So as a post defender, it's just the same argument with Karl-Anthony Towns. Karl-Anthony Towns is not a great rim protector. That's why you have Rudy Gobert. But Cat is not a bad post defender. He can deter you. He's 7 feet tall. 7 feet tall, I think 7'4" wingspan. So again, you can never be 6'7", okay, you can almost never be taller than 6'8" and be a totally washed defender. The real bad defenders in the NBA are guys like Anthony Simons, Trae Young, where it's not only that you don't put in any effort and that you're not very big. It's not only that you don't put in any effort and that you don't rebound well, etc., but it's also the fact that you absolutely are so small that everyone can mismatch hunt you. And so I just think that Jokic is an underrated defender. I would never argue that he's a great defender or that, he's some all league defender or anything like that. But I think his defensive deficiencies are severely overblown. Cast 2929 saying, Rob, did someone tell you about Koloko being added to Basketball Reference, or did you happen to check randomly? I checked 2 days ago and he was on it, and I didn't make anything of it. And then yesterday, there is a Twitter account that I follow, Stevie, I think. And he said, "Hey, everyone, don't panic." And then he showed it, and I was like, okay, shit. It's been there for 2 days. They know about it now. They didn't fix it. So this is something. So yeah. Okay. Jalen McDaniel, 6'8", pretty bad defender. Jalen McDaniel is not a bad defender. Just not a great defender. Pale Fox saying, it shows that the brain is not fixed, unchangeable organ that can constantly adapt and change throughout a person's life. H. Cassaf, are you trying to marginalize 2019? No, I'm not trying to marginalize it. I assume this has to do with my earlier comment about how I've never been as excited as I was in 2000, 2001 for the Raptors. No, I just think the 2019 thing felt like the end of something. I didn't really feel like I was at the ground floor of something amazing. 2013, 2014 felt like the start of something. 2019, 2020 felt like the end of it. So, it's great to win a championship. It's really great, though, to have a realistic chance to win 7 championships. That's sort of I'm trying to point to the human side of it, right? Like when LeBron James is drafted or when Victor Wembanyama is drafted, right? Like you start dreaming of like 10 championships, 5 championships, 7 championships. You dream of what it all can be, right? So there's a lot of excitement there. And of course, because LeBron and Wemby really exceeded exceeded expectations, you can actually start to sell yourself on an even bigger dream. But obviously, by year 8, year 9, you're actually in the reality and it just feels a little bit different. So I think that's what I mean. And Tariq saying, yo, Rob, I'm pissed that you didn't win the PCL tournament. They robbed you. Okay, so here's the thing. Yesterday was the first round of the PCL and I got eliminated. And I got eliminated specifically because I lost the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander versus Luka Doncic debate where I was supposed to debate. I was supposed to debate why Luca today was a better player than SGA. And what I did stupidly, because I did not have a very good 2 days and I totally misread the topic, was I tried to argue that Luca was the better player to build around. So I thought the topic was who is a better player to build around? Like, who would you rather start a franchise around? And so I brought up that Luca was more marketable. I brought up that, Luca's been better historically, and um, none of these things matter for who is better today. And so, salute to Hayes. He's a Chicago Bulls YouTuber who started right around the same time Pantera Basketball did. Salute to Hayes, and I think it's called Real Chicago Bulls, something like his channel. So, anyways, salute to him, and good luck. Good luck to everybody else on the PCL. It sucks. It was not the outcome that I wanted. I really did want to win, and so, but if I wanted to win, maybe I should have read the freaking topic a little bit more carefully. Pale Fox saying the overstimulation of dopamine pathways can lead to a compulsive behaviors or addiction, which can negatively affect neuroplasticity by reinforcing healthy patterns of behavior. Yes. I don't know why there's a question mark at the end of that. I agree. Lubicon saying, "Hey Rob, do you think that Scotty and the entire team will find motivation in the league only granting the Raptors one national U.S. televised game this year?" I mean, sure. I mean, whatever helps you, right? Whatever helps you charge up, motivation. But if that's what you need motivation for, I mean, something's wrong, right? Like if you need, well, oh well, we didn't get enough U.S. games, you know, whatever. Like, I don't know, to take a page out of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's book, find motivation wherever, right? If someone says nice game, find motivation in that. Say, like, oh, he's it's not enough respect. Tariq saying Vince Carter had Toronto's back when he punked Chris Broussard a couple years ago. Yes, he did, and he has always had Toronto's back. So I hope that y'all will support this. Number 15 going up in the rafters. Number 7 will soon follow. And if there's a third number, y'all let me know in the comments when this video goes live which Raptors you think should have their jerseys retired beyond Vince and Kyle Lowry. And no one is a sufficient answer. But if there was a third player that deserves to have his jersey retired, who would that player be? Damn, I agree. That's crazy. No, I think it would be DeMar. Bosch, get out of here. No, no. First of all, Chris Bosh can never have his jersey retired because Scotty Barnes is already wearing his jersey. Who's saying Vince doesn't deserve it? Are you guys under the impression that I said Vince doesn't deserve it? Vince absolutely deserves it. No, number 15 is for sure going up. Number 7 should follow. I'm saying, is there a third number that you would put up in the rafters? And Lord help me, don't say Chris Bosh. I think, honestly, I think it should be DeMar. And, we'll see where and if that ends up. But DeMar is a hell of a basketball player. And Lord knows he's not getting his number retired in San Antonio. And Lord knows he's not getting his number retired in Chicago. So I think, honestly, the Raptors should honor DeMar DeRozan by retiring number 10 someday. And I'm going to pray that between now and that day happening, that DeMar DeRozan does not keep talking and talking and talking about how good LeBron James was. Yeah. Anyways, talk to y'all later. Have a great one. Hit the like on your way out. And I apologize if I'm a little bit uncomposed today. I have had a really weird 48 hours. It has not been optimal. emotionally, mentally, all of it. And that's probably on display here with just like the lack of coherence in how I'm speaking. But hopefully, this was a little bit less bumpy than it felt. I think it will help repair the relationship. I think the relationship has been largely repaired, honestly, at this point. Yeah. SP saying those who don't want 15 in the Raptors are probably the people that started watching Vince after his Raptor days or are loyal to the Raptors media. Number two, hmm, I don't know about that, man. I really struggle with this idea of trying to retire a number of a guy who stayed for 1 year. But yeah, yeah. All right. Talk to y'all later. Bye.